Could grief be playing a role in your life, an unexpected role? Could it be a culprit in keeping you from living the life that you know you're here to live? For many of us, the answer is yes, only we really don't have any idea that it's actually the emotion and energy of grief. Unless you have lost someone very, very significant in your life recently, or you know that you're not over that loss. For you, grief might be the obvious role in your life. Grief is an experience and it's a feeling. More than that, it's an emotional pattern that your nervous system runs. And the emotional pattern is actually based in shock. This is why we have so many strange ideas about grief, where people will say you have to go through the grieving process. There's steps of grief. That is true, and that's one way to do it, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. If you have the understanding that grief is actually a form of shock in the system, how you deal with it becomes very different. So, what is shock? Shock, if you've ever been in shock, smashed your fingernail, went into shock, been in a car accident, went into shock, you kind of know what this feels like. It's where your head just feels like it's not on straight. You're a little swimmy. You may actually be on the verge of blacking out. There may be some cold sweats involved with it, or the body starts shaking. It really is where the system goes offline for just a little bit. Like picture dropping your computer, your laptop. You kind of know what that does. It puts the body into an extreme form of fight or flight. And this kind of fight or flight, once the initial impact is over, it diminishes in the foreground, but it moves to the background. And unless it's changed, unless the neurological pattern is changed, it will continue to run. And so for many people, they'll be years and years and years into a shock, into a grief pattern, and they can't get their energy back. Their brain just doesn't seem to work right. Life just doesn't seem to move forward like they want it to. It's like, feels like walking through mud. What's really, really interesting about grief and shock is that it can create real disease in the body. Did you know you can die from shock as well? People who've been in a mild car accident where they have not been injured, but for some reason go into shock, can die from that condition. I know someone who actually did die from shock. They were in a car accident, they were thrown for the car, they did not have injuries that would have created death, but shock killed them and they weren't attended to for many, many hours. So we have to look at shock in varying degrees and the kind of illness it creates in the body. Well, why? Why does it create illness when it's unchecked? It's because, and it's very simple, really, it's a massive drain on your energy. You see, the body will start to try to correct that situation, but it doesn't quite know how to correct it. So it continues to send more and more energy to the pattern of fight or flight. There's nowhere to run, there's nowhere to go, and try to correct the shock. But it's like rewiring a system, like rewiring your car and having, instead of the power going to the wheels, it goes to your door locks. It's that kind of thing. When a body doesn't have enough energy to send to the parts of the body to heal, it doesn't. And we start to go into disease pattern. So what's very, very common in people with long-term grief is things like fibromyalgia or autoimmune disorder. This chronic low energy, chronic low pain, chronic depression even can be something that you see in a shock or grief pattern. Now, grief, real grief, I mean, all grief is real, but grief in the moment, recent grief, there's a statistic that says that often after a big shock, a big impact, a big grief pattern, a person will, within 18 months to 2.5 years, get cancer. And many of you have seen this. You know people that this has happened to, or maybe it's happened to you. And it's very explainable when you understand that your body just does not have the energy to reroute to the areas of healing. It doesn't have the energy to reroute to your frontal lobes. That's that brain fog issue and the exhaustion issue. So it's really an important thing to know how to get back online. And that is what Cognomovement does. We are experts at helping the nervous system to adjust itself back to sending the full energy to where it needs to go and away from some of these patterns that are really unresourceful. Here are some things that you don't think are grief or you haven't maybe thought of as grief in the past. Things like, did you go to school? Did you go to college? Are you grieving not having gone to college? Did you go to college, but you messed around and you didn't get good grades? Are you grieving that you didn't do better at that? Do you happen to be grieving an old relationship? One that isn't current in your mind, but something went wrong there that if you had just done something different, your life would have gone a different trajectory. That's a form of grief. Here's a big one. Aging. People will start to grieve moving out of their 20s because weirdly they think moving into their 30s is old. People will grieve that at every decade. Are you starting to see lines? You're starting to see gray hair. For some people, that puts their body into a grief pattern. Something that isn't, or on the surface doesn't seem to be rectifiable. This is very often why it becomes grief and not another emotion, is because the body is stuck in shock around that. I can't fix this. I can't change it. It's already happened and it's unrepairable. That's where we see that pattern happen very, very often. But it's quite easy to change it when you know how to access it. Cognomovement is expert at that. And this Saturday, 4 p.m., in the Elevate and Illuminate series, we are hitting this pattern of grief. We're going to go over what it is, how it works, but mainly we are going to hit those patterns hard throughout about a 90-minute session to really get the body to reroute that energy. When it does, what's shocking is that it changes your mind. When the pattern is no longer there, everything looks brighter. Things taste better. You move better. You have more energy. You're more creative. You're more able to think about really moving forward in your life and taking the action to do it because your body has the energy and it's not distracted by this heavy pattern of grief. And by the way, it's still one of those lower energies. It really is a big drain on the system. And when you clear out one of these big, heavy ones, it launches your consciousness, your awareness, your ability to really see what's happening and what the world is like and who you are. And when that happens, life opens up. So if you're not already a part of the Elevate and Illuminate series, please go to cognomovement.com, go to the events page and choose this grief class or choose the whole Elevate and Illuminate series. We've already done shame and apathy, but you can go back and do those if you buy the whole series. And I highly recommend it. Or you can just come for this class, clear this out. And it alone has the capacity to make the difference that makes the difference in your whole life. I'm Liz Larson with Cognomovement. I will see you all there.